All right, welcome back to the Built to Last podcast, where we're having conversations with people about building stronger organizations or businesses, but also stronger people. And typically, the people at the top of those organizations, there's not a really clean line. And so we're talking today with Jeremy Bennett, who is somebody we've been trying to get on for quite a while. We were on his podcast, and we really enjoyed the conversation and watching what he's doing. I have a lot of like personal, selfish, scratch the itch things I'd love to chat about, and he has no idea what's coming, which is great. But what I'm going to do is you can read Jeremy's bio on LinkedIn, and it's very impressively written, and it's got all kinds of really big factoids that'll definitely draw the eye. But before we dive into some of the stuff that you've done and what you're doing now, I'd love to understand, like, how do you introduce yourself today? You've gone through a lot of change in the last 3 or 4 years. Like, introduce yourself, and what's that sound like today?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you guys, and thanks for having me on the program. That's a good question. How do I introduce myself today? So I spoke professionally for about maybe 14, 15 years on the topic of how to calm the mind. I wrote 3 books on that subject. And it all started with my journey with anxiety growing up and getting through that battle. Thank God. I thank God all the time. And at the time, I was speaking on business mindset. I still kind of do that topic, but not so much nowadays since the podcast. That's what I do full time. So over the years, I built a business with the books, speaking engagements. How to calm the mind was the topic, how to de-stress, that kind of thing. And then lockdowns happened. I think it was, what was the March 12th, 2020? Or March 4th. I can't remember the date, something like that. I was on a circuit. I was doing a speaking tour. My wife was with me on the road, and I got the news that we were about to go into lockdowns. And as you know, Canada, it was friggin' strict. And I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I was like, this is the only thing I've done for like 15 years. And she's like, no, it's just, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And I was like, no, it's going to be a while. I said, I've been studying this friggin' religiously. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's not going to be 2 weeks. So anyway, long story short, I said, I'm not the type of person that's just going to sit down and wait for things to open back up. I'm like, I got to do something, and it got to be pretty quick. I've always wanted to do a podcast, and I kind of toyed with one years ago. No traction, didn't have a freaking clue what I was doing. It was more so on health and wellness, which I love, biggest topic of my life, biggest interest. So then a few months into lockdowns, I said, I'm going to give this a try, and I have a huge interest in business. I reached out to a really good friend of mine, Kevin Casey, here in St. John's, Newfoundland, friggin' brilliant business owner and entrepreneur. And I said, would you come on the show? I got this on the go. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, this is episode number 1. Like, you want to take that risk with me? He said, yeah. And we did the show, and I enjoyed it. I was friggin' terrified, but I enjoyed it. And 1 episode turned to 2, 2 turned to 3, 3 turned to 10, 10 turned to 20. And then I said, you know what? I need to do about 100 before I evaluate this. And because I know most podcasters give up, like, I think it's 6 or 7 episodes in or something like that. So I said, before I even evaluate this, I need to do about 100. And that's, as you guys know, that's a lot of freaking work, especially me. Wasn't getting paid for it, had no safety net, lost my job overnight. But I said, yeah, I'm going to do this now. Anyway, having said all of that, how do I introduce myself? Nowadays, something I thought I would never say in a million years. I'm a full-time podcaster, and I thank God.
Amazing. I want to dive because I was a guest on your podcast, and you have a unique process. It's very system and process driven, I find, even though it feels organic. And I want to get into some of that. I'd love to go back. So you effectively ran a business of speaking well before COVID. And I've always wondered, because I used to use speaking. My first business was a food company, and I used speaking as my main marketing. So press releases, radio, speaking in front of conferences and stuff like that, and did a TEDx talk, and like speaking was
Nice.
always a marketing outlet because I enjoy it.
Hmm.
And I still speak on stages and conferences and in small rooms often. But moving from that to like my job is a professional speaker, I would love, like, if you can remember like, what was that leap? Like, how do you go from like, I think I can speak to like, this is my role? And when you use terms like I was on like circuit,
Hmm.
and, I'd love to just understand, like, I think I've passed that now because I enjoy what I do and I'm doing what I do. But that was a thing I've always, like, I just didn't understand how to make that a real job or business. What was that initial move for you?
That's a really good question. I was chatting to a doctor just like 4 or 5 days ago, and we were talking about what makes a professional a professional, but we were talking about it in his industry. I think it was, I can't remember what the topic was, but it was something health and wellness. And I said, you know what, this interesting topic, because I said, there's a debate in the speaking industry, what makes a speaker a professional speaker? I still don't know the answer, but I know that when I was talking about that exact subject like 15 years ago, I think the agreed upon answer back then was when you make so much of your income from speaking, I can't read 75%, 50%. I don't know what it is, and it could be changed now.
Hmm.
Anyway, when I started, um, my very first speaking engagement, I was doing a business plan for a grant. It was something like $50,000. I was not born, but I was raised in Flat Bay, Newfoundland, community of like 200 people, no business background, barely got through school. Um, and I wanted to shoot this documentary. And this all leads to the answer. So
Hmm.
I was like, I don't have $50,000 to shoot a documentary, or it was a TV show. I was like, how do I get it? I was like, okay, maybe there's grants out there. So I started going to, so Stephenville is our nearby town in Flat Bay. Started going there and working in their library, like sitting down. Like this was way before ChatGPT and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
This was like 2001 or something. And I do business plan one after the other, reject it, reject it, reject it, reject. Didn't have a freaking clue what I was doing. Anyway, long story short, that business plan was to get funding to do a TV show on magic, MAGIC. I was a magician, like not a musician, a magician, like semi-professional, getting paid $100 every now and then for, a gig. And I was like, I really want to do a TV show. And so did all these different business plans. Every single one were rejected. Then I finally went and met with the person, one of the decision makers, and I did a card trick for him. Like, and it was a really freaking good one. It wasn't your basic card trick. Anyway, I can't remember the time frame, but weeks later, the business plan was approved, and I was like, okay. Then when it did, actually, over in Halifax, did a TV show on magic. And, my very first speaking engagement came out of that, and it was about commitment and resiliency, about how I didn't stop with the business plans. And somebody asked me to speak, I don't know, 10 minutes or something like that, to a group of young people. And it was about, what kept me going. And I spoke, really didn't know what I was doing. I just told the story, which, as you guys know, is one of the most effective ways to speak, is
Yeah, yeah.
telling a story. And it really resonated with them. And after that, I always had a big interest in mindset. So I started, doing small talks for free, as most speakers do. And it just compounded after that, like speaking engagement after. Then I started
Mm.
doing a lot of, younger groups of people who were interested in business and entrepreneurship. And then it was focused more on mindset and business. And at the end of one of my presentations, literally, and I'm not joking, 20 seconds, I'm at the end of a 2-hour presentation on mindset, I'm maybe 15 seconds, I said something like, guys, everything I just taught you about mindset and business, I used to really help me get through a tough time with my mindset, with stress and that kind of thing. The next day, so this was like 2009. So skip forward like years later.
Hmm.
So I said that at the end of a presentation. And then the next morning, no emails on business mindset. It was all about those 15 seconds. What did you have? How did you get through it? I got stressed. My daughter got this. My son got, and then I started thinking like, I got a story to share. And to be very honest, I didn't want to share that story. Growing up with OCD, with severe anxiety. And I started sharing it little by little. And it was tough. It was always tough getting to that point on the stage where I shared my story. And most times I tear up. Sometimes I cry. The first few dozen times I literally couldn't finish it. Couldn't finish the story because it was like, well, wow, I'm reliving all of this on stage in front of 300, 400, 500 people. And I'd look at the audience and I say, guys, I'm sorry. I can't finish this. Let's move on to a different topic. I don't know how many times I did that. And then doors just opened up, different opportunities, the World Organization of Natural Medicine. I started presenting at their conferences in Ontario, wonderful organization, met so many amazing people there and just was doing it just over and over and over again, week by week by week by week by week to, all kinds of different organizations. And then, of course, lockdowns hit. But I do miss it. I still try to help out as many people as I possibly can in any way I can on that subject. But yeah, it's, and it was just opportunity. It was very messy. It was frigging messy. I didn't know where the next paycheck was coming from. I don't know how many times I get paid, spend the money, and then events get canceled. And I'm like, uh-oh, I got to refund this money that I already spent. Like it was a lot of those scenarios. So I wasn't one of those speakers who had their laptop by a poolside and, daydreaming
Those
about
are made up.
Oh, I know.
Those are like rainbows and unicorns,
God,
leprechauns.
it was friggin' messy. Yeah. It was friggin' messy. So I hope that answers the question in some way.
Just on the speaking, did you ever invest in like agents or team or structure at some point? Did you make that leap to something outside of yourself, or did you kind of gear it your own?
Yeah, I had one, which was an agency in Atlantic Canada, and they did good. They actually got me one of my biggest ones in Edmonton. Group of thousands of people. It was phenomenal. But mainly it was just me, just grinding at it all the time. And one thing I learned the hard way was that when people reached out to me, I always used to write them back this big, massive, long email. This is why you should get me. And at the end of the day, I looked frigging desperate. And I learned that the hard way. And nowadays, like I turn down more engagements than I actually do because I got a little 4-year-old. I do the podcasts for a living and I don't want to be on the road anymore. I really don't. I don't miss that side of it, but I do miss, speaking. And I do the occasional one. But yeah, it was always freaking messy. But I tell you one thing, I learned a lot of skills because it was messy. And I learned the hard way. It's kind of like when I edit a show, one of my podcasts on Final Cut Pro. I'm like, I didn't have a friggin' clue how to use that software, but because I didn't know anything, I learned how to use it the hard way. Every mistake I made, I had to call up Apple and they'd be telling me. And my point is that, like to me, learning the hard way is one of the best ways to learn because you got to get messy. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to make the mistakes. You got to go through the struggles. You got to go through all that. And I built so much resiliency because of it. And I wouldn't change it for the
It's very validating, and I promise I'll let you speak, Colby. I have lots of things I want to chat about, but the connection, because we don't do a very good job of telling our guests what we do, because this isn't really a marketing and a solicitation podcast. But what's interesting to like tie it together, why it's so interesting for me is almost all of the work we do are for founders or leaders who built a business doing exactly what you said. Like you got to figure it out. You got to get in the weeds. You got to, do that. And then at some point you tip the scale and you decide to grow something bigger than one person will support, whether you use the word scale or you want to have more family life and it's got to be more, and it's the person who figured it out. How do you make that leap to I'm now managing systems of people and not doing the work?
Mm-hmm.
That's specifically the point where we try to go in and because of both of our histories. And so it's just like understanding how other people are doing it. Because I agree, like you need a certain amount of naivete and grit and resilience and figure it out and problem solving to get to a certain point. But then those become weaknesses to a certain degree, unless you. So I'm always just like, how are other people doing it? It's been a very interesting question.
You know, when I got into this industry, the speaking industry, like the podcasting industry, one of the biggest things that did it for me was consistency. And I talk about it on my LinkedIn channel all the time. And I know it's overused and people talk about consistency and all the, but it's frigging true. It's frigging true. Like, and I tell you another thing is in terms of speaking and the podcast as well. I didn't know this when I created the speaking business, but building in public and sharing that journey, oh my God. Especially I didn't do it with the speaking industry, but with the podcast, I did do it. And I didn't know that was a thing, building in public, until I started the podcast and people
Yeah,
started talking about it. I didn't know what a friggin' personal brand was until like 200 episodes in. Like everybody's talking about a personal brand,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I was Googling, what the frig is a personal brand? I'm interviewing this person on a personal brand. What is it? Like there was so many things I learned during this process, but consistency. Oh my God. Speaking any kind of business, like if we don't show up, if we don't do the work, if we don't launch messy, if we don't launch before we're ready, how in the world are we going to get feedback? How are we going to know what works? How are we going to this show, this like my podcast, it was 200 I'd say about 200 episodes before I could ask a question and listen to the guest and think about a follow-up question at the same time. For 200 episode, if I was listening to the guest, I couldn't think about a follow-up question. If I was thinking about a follow-up question, I didn't have a friggin' clue what the guest was talking about. Like it took around 200 episodes.
Yeah.
Just the way now, not everybody's like that, but that's the way my brain worked. But it's launching messy. It's getting your it's the blood, sweat, and tears, and I know everybody says it, but launching in public and doing it messy and learning from real people with real feedback, learning what works, finding our voice, all that stuff, it paid off for me because I was very vulnerable. I asked my guests, what's wrong with this show? What's good about this show? What do you want me to do? Who do you want me to interview? And I listened every friggin' day. I listened to them.
And you said one word there that is like, because you might like I've learned these things at certain points, but you innately already had overcome the ability to be vulnerable, because vulnerable is like the number one trust builder.
Yeah.
And you obviously it wasn't comfortable, but the ability for you to go on and tell uncomfortable stories and share your story for the benefit of others, like that's a hurdle that like you would have had to overcome to show your building phase online. It's that little bit of vulnerability is everything. You kind of already innately had figured that one out.
Yeah, I tell you, I was no stranger at that point to being vulnerable. Not that it was easy. Every single one of my presentations, it was tough talking about my background. And let me tell you a little story about that, actually. I can remember, so it was my first book deal. This was before the age of AI writing books. I don't know when this was, 2010, if I had to guess, something like that. 2012, maybe. I woke up and I was writing the first book, and The Power of the Mind, How I Beat OCD. That's what it was called. I was maybe, halfway through it. And I had a presentation that night, and it was all about, mainly about my story and how I encourage people to reach out for help when they were suffering. And then what I did to, what worked for me. And I woke up that morning and I said that the fear started to kick in. And I'm like, when I release this book, I don't know if it was 10 people going to read it, thousands, millions. I don't know. But I was like, my story's going to be in that book. And it was friggin' personal. It was personal. And so I woke up and I'm like, nope, fear got the best of me. I'm done with the book contract. Didn't know what that meant because I had signed at that point. Like I had a publisher. And I said, I don't know if I'm going to jail now. Like if I'm breaking a contract, what does that mean? I don't know. But I said, I'm going to have to break the news to them because I didn't know what people were going to think about me once they read that book. And so I had a presentation that night and I said, no matter what, I'm going to do the presentation and share my story. But this is the last time I'm ever sharing my story. And the amount of relief I felt was unbelievable. So I went to that presentation. In my mind, I'm like, I'm not doing the book anymore. Thank God. Um, too scared of what people were going to think about me. So anyway, I did the presentation. I can remember it was 283 people there. It was sold out, and that's how many chairs there were in the auditorium. And I did my story, cried on stage like every other time. And then at the end of every presentation, I always made it a thing to go into the audience and stand up, and whoever wanted to come chat to me one-on-one, whoever had questions, I was there. I don't care if it was 4 or 5 o'clock in the next morning that I left. I was standing up there until the last person, could meet me who wanted to chat. And I went into the audience with the thinking, thank God I'm never sharing this story again. Thank God, never, ever again. And just the weight was released from me. So anyway, I went into the audience, and a mother and her daughter approached me. The daughter was about my age, and she was crying that much that she couldn't talk. So the mother had to talk for her. And the mother went on to explain, that her daughter was suffering the way I suffered, didn't go out, didn't date, didn't socialize, doing horribly in school. Like, it was like my story, and suffering with severe anxiety and stress. And keep in mind, at that point, in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking, I'm never sharing my story again, ever. Like, thank God, the relief is not that I didn't want to help people. Of course I did. But it was just too personal, and it would get to me, and people were finding out about, like, just the very personal stuff. Anyway, the mother looked at me. She was crying too. The daughter was crying. The mother looked at me, and she said, "You have no idea how much hope you just given us." And it was like a smack in the face from up there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to continue to share this story. And I went home that night, and I'm like, I believe that was from up there. I do. I'm not going to convince anybody, but that I believe it was the most impeccable timing. Impeccable timing. Those two women took frigging guts for them to come up and tell me their story. It took so much courage. I know what that's like. I did it for 14 years. And if they wouldn't have come up and shared their story in their most vulnerable time, I wouldn't have finished that book. I wouldn't have did the second and third book. I wouldn't have spoke on my story. My story has gone on to help tens of thousands of people. And it goes to show how much a story can affect somebody. And when that story is told in the most vulnerable way, the amount of influence that can have on somebody's life, and that life having the influence on others' lives, we can never quantify that. And I wish to God I knew who they were, because I want to sit down with them, and I want to thank them, and I want to tell them that if you didn't share your story, I wouldn't have helped the tens of thousands of people that I helped. And I reached out on Facebook a few times and kind of shared that story, and wanting them to read it if they were on my Facebook. And I give anything to meet them. But it goes to show how important it is sometimes to be vulnerable in the right way, and share struggles that we're going through.
I feel like we have covered some relevant touch points in some of the stories I've heard from you, Colby. Like, any thoughts of
Yeah,
where
I
your
mean,
headspace is at?
pretty timely. Now, it's funny how much, pain people can go through themselves.
Yeah.
You're so right that, like, if one person's story resonates more than another's, it's like the value, it's invaluable. Like, just certain things click for people in different ways, and it's funny. Yeah, I've been exploring a lot of this, and like a lot of things you said in the beginning as well. Like, I just hired my first meditation coach. It's like
Wow. How cool is that?
it's super in depth. We're meeting 4 times a week, and like homework, lots of things, like intense breathing, meditation. I've never done any of it before. And it's just, I think I've just been holding a lot of things together for a long time. And yeah, just something kind of broke like not that long ago. Yeah, I guess I haven't shared this, but hey, we're here, aren't we?
I love
If
it.
you weren't going to, I was going to for you. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate it because yeah, it was a huge learning moment. Like, yeah, okay, so here's the Cole's Notes version. Felt like a bit of a block about a year and a half ago. Like I wanted the business to grow to a certain point, and I felt like my ability to grow it. I felt this kind of physical wall in front of me. The only way I could describe. So I started looking into ADHD and like, the typical like, oh, I always thought I had ADHD, but ADHD is this, thing that everybody says it is. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, that's my ADHD. Like everybody says that kind of stuff. So I started looking into it, doing a concerning amount of research, we'll call it.
Mhm.
And started to go down that rabbit hole for about a year and kind of am in the process of kind of rebuilding myself after realizing like how in depth this goes and how deep it goes right back to remember stuff from like being a very young child and feeling these same blocks and all that kind of stuff. And it's just interesting. Like I'm just so done with like the not being vulnerable, I
Mhm.
suppose. Like, you get people rolling their eyes at certain things, or you can tell stuff isn't landing for somebody, or somebody doesn't want to hear it, or they don't have time for it. And there's certain personalities that are, that's always going to happen. But, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of in your shoes right now of the story you told when you first started speaking, because I've had quite a few people approach me about like, I think this story should be shared. And I've been ruminating on that quite a bit going through this. I mean, this is very recent. And thanks for sharing what you just shared. And like super resonant for me. And I had a conversation. I'm a part of a entrepreneur group, EO.
Oh yeah, love them.
Yeah, and I was talking to one of the members, and he said something to me that really drove home for me the other day. We were talking about going through hard things, and this was in the context of EO, but it made me think broader than that. He said, when I go through hard things now, I just think, wow, this is going to make me such a more valuable member to the other people in the group.
Mm.
Like changing that perspective. And I was like, whoa, like this is going to make me a more valuable fiance and husband or whatever, like a more valuable peer to my friends. And it's just an interesting like shift. And it's funny how we can be stuck in those mindsets. I'm so curious about some of the work that you do around mindset. And I guess it kind of leads me into my next question, or my first question, uh, has there been a common thread that you've seen when it comes to making a mind shift, like a mindset shift, over the years?
That's such a good question.
Big one, sorry.
God, I love this topic. I got so much to
Also,
talk about here.
I'll also say that I've got a background in nutrition as well, like the holistic
Oh
nutrition
my
stuff.
God, you're like my
And like,
freaking best friend. That's meditation and nutrition are my two biggest topics.
yeah,
Like I
so
love
I
this.
mean, yeah, like I've been in the health and wellness industry for a long. That's how I got
Wow.
my start, and I love it, and I'm always testing and reading and nerding out on all that.
Same here. I
Yeah.
friggin' love that topic. Such good questions. By the way, let me say this. I don't have a hard stop anymore. I had a podcast coming up after this. She just rescheduled, so we can go on a bit longer if you guys want to.
Great. At some point, I'm going to be shallowing it back into the podcast, but I don't want to stop any of it. I was ready to give up all of my geeky, techie questions around this. And it's a very timely topic as somebody who works closely with somebody going through a similar journey. So I'm like, really, this is a very timely conversation.
I tell you. So, mindset to me, I mean, it's everything. Not that I'm an expert, but is anybody an expert? I don't know. A few things here. My life changed when I realized that the brain doesn't know the difference between something real and a thought. So the average person has about 60,000 thoughts a day. Most of them are bad thoughts, dwelling on something bad in the past or fearing what could happen tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now. The brain says your wish is my command. And if it's a negative thought, a nasty one, which 90% of our thoughts are, the adrenals say, thank you very much. We're going to trigger the release of cortisol, adrenaline, and put you into that fight or flight response, which should only happen when you're in danger. But I mean, most of us are not in danger. 9.9% of the time, we're not in actual danger. The brain says, I don't care. I couldn't care less. Your thoughts are my command. And that's true. I mean, if you think about somebody you hate, what's going to happen? You're going to feel tense, right? Your heart is going to beat faster. If you think about somebody you love, your heart is going to beat slower. You're going to feel more relaxed. And at the end of the day, we have thousands of thoughts, thousands of freaking thoughts. 90% of them are the same thoughts we had the day before. And what happens is that when we have those thoughts, the brain interprets them as a threat, like we're in danger, and we're not, and triggers the release of the stress chemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, things like that. And it's a double-edged sword. Like our thoughts can relax us, but they can also put us into a stress state. So if we think about it, the vast majority of our thoughts are negative, dwelling on the past, fearing the future. The vast majority of the time, that's why people are stressed out. And we are constantly in that state of mind, constantly in the fight or flight response, when we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be. So one of my biggest realizations was that the brain doesn't know the difference between something real and a thought. And once we can, I don't know how many times people, and this is not an egocentric thing, that's not a part of my life. I don't have a big ego, but I don't know how many times people will come up to me after a 2-hour presentation, doing it almost 15 years, and they'll say, I learned more in your 2-hour presentation than I did 15 years, 20 years of trying to research this. Because I told them the facts. Most people go through anxiety. They don't have a freaking clue what anxiety is. They don't have a clue why their heart is beating fast. They don't know why they're sweating. They don't know why they're tense. They don't. It's like, well, first of all, anxiety to me is a gift from God. It lets us know something is up. It's like physical pain. Nobody likes physical pain. Physical pain keeps us alive. It's a gift. It's a gift. Imagine breaking your leg, but not having the ability to feel the pain associated with the broken leg. What would you do? You would continue to walk, run on that leg until you permanently disabled it. Pain is not coming from the leg, it's coming from the brain to say, stop running, stop walking. Something's, get down to a doctor. And we all curse physical pain. We think about it. We all curse physical. Oh, I don't want to be. I got a headache. You don't have a headache because you have a Tylenol deficiency. The pain is there to say something is off. Do something about it. And yet we neglect to see how incredibly powerful our brains are. And when we truly, I don't understand the brain. Does anybody fully understand the brain? But when we understand that these are protective mechanisms there to keep us alive, we start to look at it differently. And when I taught this subject on meditation, I'm not an expert, but when people start to realize how incredibly complex their brain is, and that it is there to protect us at the end of the day. I think we got, I don't know, I can't remember the stat, 60 trillion cells doing like 6 trillion things every single second, and every single cell knows exactly what every other cell is doing the second it does it to work in perfect harmony to keep us alive. And we think with our little tiny conscious mind, we know better than our brain? Like, come on. Like when we understand the complexity of our brain, and where that came from, to me, God made that. And where that came from, when we start to tap into that, like I looked at anxiety and stress in a completely different way. And I started doing active meditation, which is basically doing things and concentrating on what you're doing while you're doing it. If we're sweeping the floor, most people are dwelling on yesterday or fearing tomorrow. Sweep the floor. Sweep it. That's it. Sweep it. Concentrate on it. And then, oddly enough, it becomes less of a chore when you're concentrating on exactly what you're doing. Because if you're less in the past or in the future, bad past, bad future, and you're doing a chore, then you're associating that negative emotion with the chore you're doing. But if you're completely in the present moment and you're doing that chore, you feel at ease. And one of the biggest tips I've ever learned, Eckhart Tolle had made a big piece of that puzzle for me. His book, The Power of Now. I must have read that 20 times. I can't remember. But catching yourself thinking negative thoughts. Got to be one of the best I don't want to say hacks because that's a
I
horrible
can't remember
word
if it was
when
that
comes to
book or
this.
another one, but somebody once told me is like worrying is like praying for what you don't want.
I used to say that in my presentations all the
I
time.
love
Worry
that.
is a prayer for what you don't want.
Yeah.
And most of us are constantly worrying. And then what do? We text about it. We email. We talk about it all the time. And when we open our mouth and we talk about the thing that we don't want to attract, then we got in the brainstem something called the reticular activating system, which is forcing our eyes to pay attention to those opportunities that reinforce what we think about. It's kind of like when you buy a new car, what happens? You start to notice, not see, you start to notice that same car everywhere because that car has relevance in your brain now. We saw those cars the week before, but because we didn't own one, it wasn't relevant. So once it's relevant, the eyes start to pay attention to all the opportunities that reinforce that energy. So if somebody's saying, I'm never going to get this job, I'm never going to scale, I'm never going to make 10K a month. Well, good luck making that. You're not going to make it because your reticular activating system is going to force your eyes to see all the opportunities that will reinforce that. And you can only act upon the opportunities that you are aware of. That's why everybody's going around in this vicious circle and they're blaming everybody in the world except themselves.
All of that. Yes, please. couple of things. Funny enough, one of the last text messages I sent my friend last night who I work out with, I was like, you need to take a deep dive on cortisol. Because that's my new rabbit hole as of
oh yeah.
Funny enough. And I think what was happening to me specifically is that with the, thinking back to a young age with ADHD, because there were certain things that that executive function, I just couldn't do them, knew how to do it, understood it, but couldn't do it. Told myself when I was, grade 3, like, oh, well, the thoughts crept in of you're stupid, you're lazy, whatever, all those kind of terrible thoughts, swept them under the rug. And I was like, oh, I'll just go focus on like being social, or like, how can I win people over so that they like me over the years? And that turned into being good at sales or like building trust in business. But it was kind of a bit of a lie to myself, or like, not a lie, but like it was a defense mechanism. And now that I've discovered that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been people pleasing for so long. And it's causing so much internal stress because I'm trying to manipulate the situation so that it doesn't turn into conflict, or, you get found out about the things that you're not very good at. It's like, it's a really weird place to be. But, and also you said something, that I had a realization when I started doing nutrition consulting. First, I couldn't quite wrap my head around why people, I was young, I was 21, 22, couldn't wrap my head around why people wouldn't make the changes they needed to make or should make. And after like a year or so, I was looking into, different psychology, mindset things, and it hit me. I was like, whoa, this is not a nutrition problem. If I tell you to drink water and eat healthy and all that kind of stuff, this is a deep psychologically rooted thing that I'm not equipped for. So I gave up on nutrition coaching for that reason. And I still feel good about it. I'm like, I still feel good about it. Yeah. If someone asks me a technical question, I'll answer it, whatever. But like that work, like my other interest is like, if I was to live another life over, or maybe I'll still do it, is to become a psychologist, because I'm so fascinated with like this, it's all here. Everything is here. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be reading that, The Power of Now, immediately.
That's good. It's a good book.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you for that.
God, the pleasure is all mine. And like you just nailed it. It is mindset. We can have all the information we want on nutrition, on working out, on business, on commitment. That doesn't matter. If we don't have the mindset, we're not going to capitalize on it.
There's never been more content online about how to do things right than there has been. Like every minute, there's more content than there has ever been online about exactly what you can.
And I think people are suffering more than ever. Like here, like, yes, times have been harder. But times in my mind are more complex now. There's so much choice, and that's not helpful. There's so many avenues we could go. There's so many things that we're seeing every day that are like the grass is greener in 10,000 different ways when you're doom scrolling, right? You're like that stuff it's putting us in a really unique position as a the human race. Like
So
it's
true.
yeah.
I'd like to pull a thread here that cautiously, because it might turn into nothing, but it's just like, I think you have some shared experience, especially with the types of conversations you've been having for such a long time. Because both of you, if I was from my perspective, the story I'm telling is, this mindset shift and overcut. Like, you guys had ways you were built that you've over time become more aware of and acknowledged and changed. And maybe I got that wrong, but that's the feeling I have. One of the things that happened to me, that is around mindset and some of the stress, but I also see in a lot of the people we work with, is when your mindset has to shift or is shifted for you. And so like like very lightly talks into like a trauma situation. Like, so just quick for me is like, I actually, if anything, I worry constantly about not having enough emotion.
Mhm.
And so like, I'm just not a very emotional person. I have EQ, I know all that, but like, I'm the guy who's like, shouldn't I be crying at this funeral or at this situation? Like, I just not. And like, I had never cried in a movie. I had never cried in a book. I had never, it's just not that way. And I didn't experience anxiety. I had stress, but never like an unknown reason for anxiety. Like, it just, I had heard, and very normative, I thought. But then I grew and like I built a business, and that business crashed and burned very publicly, very terribly for like a year and a half. And I burned out. I was in the hospital. I had 6 months, like not able to leave a room. And coming out the other side, well, the happy ending towards the end, like for as Colby's point of view, I'm now a more valuable peer and advisor because of this
Mm.
experience. So I rationalize, and I'm happy that I wouldn't want to go through it, but I think it was the right path. Um, but my brain's different. And I know I've talked to a lot of people on this topic, especially like I'm very open with the failure story. I just want to make sure everybody in the room's prepared to understand it. So it's, but like, I now can't watch a movie without crying. I
Wow.
get anxiety when the phone rings. I get like, there's things that are fundamentally different. The best way somebody explained it to me was, everybody talks when you have something traumatic happen, or, burnout or whatever you call it. Hope you probably have better words than I do. Is like, they're like, you'll get better. And it's like, well, that's just not simply true. Like, there's lots of injuries your body has where you have to learn to accommodate. Your like
Mhm.
scar tissue is real. There's injuries where you just have to learn, and you're now going to operate in a different way. And I started internalizing, and this was the positive move for me. Maybe it was the rationalization, but like, I'm not the same person. I can't do the same things the same way as I was pre 2016. And now, my mind, for me, I started to resent it, and I've had to work on this, is because my mindset was shifted for me. I'm sure I could have seen and made some decisions earlier, but by the time I noticed it, like, it was shift or get off the pot. And get off the pot wasn't a healthy thing. You must talk to some other people who are like less, like, maybe just like sometimes this is shifted onto people, and you got to deal with it after the fact. It's not like it's not a choice. It's not a personal journey that I'm going down. It's a like, all right, I'm
Right.
attacked.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So something very traumatic, could be anything, happens,
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
you're in the situation, whether you didn't choose it. It's just this is like, I have visceral reactions to things now that
Yeah.
yeah, that's
No
it.
personal choice involved.
That's interesting.
Or maybe there was, but like, it's like, how do I deal with it? Like, how do I recoup? How do I learn a different way?
Um, just a short kind of experience share. I also had a business that crashed and burned. It was a health and wellness business that I've talked about on this podcast before, but we grew it to a pretty interesting size. It was like an 1,100 plus stores across the country and stuff. It was pretty cool. I was the
What?
face of the company and stuff on the
Wow.
commercials. So my whole personality and identity was attached to that. I had nothing else, and wasn't making any money. It was just like we were grinding, and that rug got pulled out from underneath me. Partner kind of betrayed a lot of trust there, and there was an investment made by another company, and during that restructure, my whole family and everything was out. I had brought my family into that business too, so it was a tough time. But I remember sitting on the couch downstairs in my parents' basement that I had to move back into, and I had my head between my hands. It was in the dark, and I don't know. I've been trying to read like Tony Robbins or something. It was the only thing I knew about at that time, and still great. And I asked myself, am I not going to trust people again? Because this is where the pain was. Or am I going to think of the two people that I would go to war with for the rest of my life and hope that there's more out there? And I remember that like vividly, and choosing like, man, there's got to be more people out there that I can, that I can resonate with and collaborate with and grow with. And it's just an interesting, like, but that being said, all those visceral responses after that still exist in a sense. Like I got like spidey senses that probably aren't helpful in a lot of ways or useful in any way, really. But yeah.
I tell you, well, first of all, thank you to both of you for sharing that. To me, I think one of the most important things when it comes to change that we can do is to look at what calls the shots in our brain, right? We got the conscious mind, we got the subconscious mind. I love this topic. A lot, like, we can try to wish into existence how we want to feel, how we want to react. But I mean, that's only responsible for about 5%, right? It's kind of like going to the gym January 1st and you're using your willpower. You're using that 5% of your brain to get yourself in there. And then, a week goes by, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's crickets in the gym, right? Because their subconscious mind kicks in, and that's where 95% of us come from. If the subconscious mind has the belief, nah, I don't really like the gym, that's what's eventually going to rule the day. Might take a week, might take 2, might take 3. It's kind of like I used to use this in my presentations, this analogy about how to stop taking things personally. If somebody, and I mean, we heard the first part of it, if somebody got a problem with you for no good reason, if you didn't, smack them in the face or hit them or something, if they have a problem with you for no good reason, don't like the way you look, where you come from, what you do in your spare time, whatever, and they got a problem with that, at the end of the day, they can't simply snap their fingers and not have a problem with you. And people in the audience, they might think, nah, that's not correct. And I look at them and I'll say, okay, let me prove it to you that they don't call the shots, just like you don't call the shots, like talking about the audience. And I'll say, think about your favorite food. Let's say it's pizza.
Exactly what it was, by the
way. and I'll look at them and I'll be like, okay, you got your favorite food? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'll say, snap your fingers and hate that food. And they'll all crack up laughing as if I'm crazy. But I'm like, yeah, I just proved my point. You can wish all you want. You can't snap your fingers and change who you are. Consciously, you can say, oh, I have this and blah, 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 I'm abundant, blah, blah, blah. If your subconscious mind is not in alignment to what your conscious mind is thinking or writing or texting or emailing or saying out loud, the subconscious mind is always going to win. And 95% of the time when somebody got a problem with you, it's as we know, it's just a projection of what they're going through. And I look at the same audience and I'm like, I always say this, think about somebody who you don't like and snap your fingers and love them. They can't do it. Think about somebody you like and snap your fingers and hate them. They can't do it because the subconscious mind calls the shots. And a lot of the time, in order for the subconscious mind to change, is when we do go through trauma and we do look at life differently. And I don't know, like, I think I was very sick growing up at such a young age, about, 12 years old, it started, that my personality kind of shaped because of that. And I wouldn't change any of it for anything because it brought so many wonderful experiences to my life. And I'm a big believer in the butterfly effect as well. Like every single last little tiny decision we make has a huge impact on our lives today. I look at my little 4-year-old, my little boy, and I'm like, if I didn't live and go through every single last bit of suffering that I went through, my little boy wouldn't be in my life right now. And he's everything. He's my world. And every single time I go through something traumatic, I look at the good things in my life and I'm like, this had to happen exactly the way it's happening in order to bring upon the good things that I'm thankful for nowadays. And I think, Colby, like you just said, it's we can have all the information we want on nutrition, But if it's not in our mind to go ahead and do it, what's the saying? You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? Like, it's not the information, it's the mindset. And meditation, I think, is one of the most valuable tools. Like, I tell you, I just read a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm telling you, never read a book as powerful as that one. And I've read God knows how many freaking books in my career. That's what I did for a living, was to show people how to calm their minds. Nothing compares to this. And The Power of Now is a close second, but by Eckhart Tolle. But this book is all about how our conscious mind is the small player and responsible for 5% of our what we do, how we act, all, the things we crave. And the subconscious mind is where it's really at. But even more so, it's more about brain and heart coherence and making them think. So the brain is more about the thinking and putting the signal out to the universe, God, whatever we want to call it, God to me. And then the heart is more about attracting that energy back. I just did a freaking horrible job explaining that. I'm telling you, my wife and I are different when it comes to this subject. She wants to know what to do in order to, get the things she desires. I need to know the science. I need to know it. Like, I don't care if it takes 10 years. I need to know every freaking chemical involved. I need to know what the adrenal glands are doing. I need to know what the bloodstream is doing. I need to know what the heart is doing. I need to know what the brain is doing. I need to know what the frontal cortex does. Everything. Like, that's how I learn. And that book is like, I don't think I've ever said this in my entire life, my jam. That's not how I talk.
It is now.
But I'm telling you, it's the science of why we attract what we attract and why we are attracted to what we are attracted to. But I'm telling you, I want to get him on the show, on my podcast. And actually, I just released an episode with a guest today. Her name is Sharka, and she goes to a lot of his live events. He does 7-day retreats. And I'm also watching, if you can get your hands on this, on the network, I think it's called Gaia, the spiritual network. It's kind of like spirituality shows, like Netflix is the spirituality show, like Netflix online streaming service. Gaia is all for spirituality, growth, all that stuff. You buy a membership. And anyway, he's on there with a series called Rewired. Like, everybody in the world should watch it, period.
How do you
every
spell
friggin' school, everybody.
How do you spell Gaia?
Gaia. And it's like Netflix for spirituality shows and growth shows and self-help shows. Like, that's the only thing on that network. But anyway, it's I've been taking meditation more seriously now, even though I taught it for 15 years, like the basics of it, like the chemicals involved and that kind of thing. But now I'm actually, like, I'm looking at my mat there now, which is a workout mat, big spongy one, and I lie down on that and I do his meditations. It's nothing like I've ever done ever. And it's all about making the brain work in coherence with the heart. Anyway, it's the science of the science of the science of the science of meditation and why we attract what we attract. It's friggin' amazing.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say this out loud because it's, so you remind me to go for it. I feel like, because at the core, what we do is around helping organizations go through some of this change that we've been talking about as the personal self. And like the way you're talking about the subconscious and the conscious, the 5% and 95% is you get up to like 100, 200 employees. Like, it's very similar. Like, the actions of a couple individuals or one leader making a decision is 5%. It's the culture and the values and the systems and the process and the 70 to 500 actions of respect or disrespect between all those individuals that become your ability to connect and see real change in an organization. Like, I'm going to go, like, this might sound me taking it analytical and tactical outside of a very emotional topic, but I am like thrilled by this connection of the organization. Because I believe like really great things are going to be done by well-meaning organizations, not for profit's sake. But like, if you want to make real change, how do you get a group of people to work together towards a common goal? And, people vilify the CEOs in business and corporate world, but the entrepreneur as the change maker is still based on a powerful organization structure. How do we get people to work together towards it? And I just think there's a real interesting correlation there.
Also, consciousness versus the conscious versus the subconscious. I'm kind of tying it together to, like, there's the culture we say we have in an organization, but then there's the culture
what the one we tolerate.
Yeah, like there's the fear or the whatever it might be, but yeah. But you made me think of something when you said a minute ago about the sweeping. Self-soothing the anxiety or whatever. I didn't realize that I was doing that, that's why I picked really physical hobbies, and because I couldn't think of anything else. I couldn't. I was locked in, whether it was mountain biking or MMA fighting. Like those were the two. Like the more stimulating, the better I felt afterwards. But like I didn't realize what I was doing. Now that I'm conscious of that, I'm like, okay, how can I actually create that maybe without a broken nose? So it's been an interesting journey. I didn't realize that, like, all the figuring out executive function training in my own weird way, or figuring out how to lower anxiety in my own weird way. It's just so funny that people are going to go through their entire lives not making that connection for themselves. It's scary to me.
I think about that. I'm obsessed with that topic. Like mindset, subconscious versus conscious, how to get into the present moment. Why is this not taught to every freaking kid on the planet? This is the most fundamental piece of education, I believe, that anybody could ever learn. And I don't know how many times, like I used to study, I have a psychology degree. So I did 4 years of psychology, and that was because of the struggle I went through. I wanted to learn everything. Once I came out of OCD, I was like, I freaking want to learn everything about the brain. So I did 4 years, did a degree over at St. FX. And then my real learning came from the dozens and dozens and dozens of books, the seminars, the conferences, the World Organization of Natural Medicine, working with all these people, and then really chatting to them. And to me, another big topic was NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I started studying that on the side, not officially with anything, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And one thing, like the words we speak, like, oh my God. Like I in my presentations, I started incorporating it into my presentations. And I'll say up on the big screen behind me, I would say, when people say, thank you very much, a lot of people have the habit of saying, no problem. Or if somebody says, I really appreciate that, they say, no worries. Or they say, how are you doing today? And they say, not bad, right? Subconscious mind doesn't filter. It hears exactly what it hears. It's very, very objective. And every single word holds a particular energy. If I said, and I used to say this on stage all the time too, I put a big picture on the big screen. And I look at the audience and I'd say, if I came into this room, 500 people, you didn't have a clue who I was. You didn't know that I spoke on what topic I spoke on. And if I looked at you and I said one word, cancer, how would you react? And I literally would look out in the audience and I could see shoulders just shrug and I could see their heads going down. And you could feel the energy drop. And then I look at them and I say, if you had no idea who I was, you didn't know I was Jeremy Bennett, you didn't know what this subject was about that you're about to hear. And I said one word, just one word. How would you react? That word being puppy. And everybody would light up, the big smiles. Bang, endorphins released, just like that, just from a friggin' thought. And how many times we get into negative thinking. And then we take it one step further. We start texting everybody about it. We start vocalizing. We start emailing. If we don't like somebody, we tell somebody we don't like them. We are feeling that. That is destroying our lives. Like the people in my life who I really love, who are going through something traumatic, it kills me to hear what they're saying out loud. Because they're attracting more of that energy into their lives. And if they're saying, I'm never going to heal, well, good luck healing. And I know it's important to vent, and I know it's important to get it out. But at the same time, we have to be very conscious of the power that our brain has. If we say, I'm never going to heal, Your wish is my command. The reticular activating system is going to focus on all the opportunities that, if acted upon, will bring upon that reality. And if people don't say, nah, you're full of it, that's silliness, that doesn't happen. Well, like again, what happens when you buy a new car? You start to see that car. Well, you start to notice that car everywhere. And you can only act upon the opportunities that you're aware of. So if we're trying to heal and we're like, I'm never going to heal. The universe hates me, blah, 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 blah. The brain is saying, oh, okay, that's a real thought. Even if it's not real, the brain says, that's a real thought. Now, just to make sure you're not crazy, I'm going to show you the opportunities that reinforce that so you can go ahead and act upon that and receive what you're convincing me is real. And like, it is, to me, the most no-brainer in terms of this has to be taught to everybody on the face of the earth. From the moment we are able to absorb information, this is the topic for health, wellness, business, everything.
Yeah.
Most
Well, it
timely-
sounds like a small issue to fix. Like, let's just
Yeah, I mean, like, talk about timely. Interesting. That's
all right. I normally, we get to this point often where we go deep, and then I'm like, oh, I can't bring it back to shallow. But I'm going to be really annoyed if I don't go in one more direction. But before I do, I'm going to try to segue. But before I do, is there any, like, I have to say, comment on where we're at right now, Colby? Are you?
yeah, one more thing. An interesting, I don't even know where I first heard it, but talking about the subconscious and how to work on some of that, where some of those maybe insecurities come from. An interesting thought that I've come across is rebuilding trust with yourself. So if I know in my subconscious, like if I sit, let's say I make a commitment and I know that I in my subconscious, I believe I'm not going to follow through on the commitment. That means saying no to more things for me and doing, like, finishing the things I'm saying yes to rebuild that trust with myself it feels like a bit of a tactical move to start to change that subconscious a little bit for myself. It's like I need to show myself some of the receipts the things that I've done to rebuild that trust. And it's kind of like one of the first, besides meditation, because I when I started I didn't get it, but now I'm starting to get it. But also that felt like one of the only tactical things that I could start to take control of, and like, okay, well, I'm going to slow down, I'm going to peel back, I'm going to cut hobbies out, I'm going to decide what's important to me, and then I'm going to go get some receipts on the things that I'm committing to. It's just an interesting thing that I came across, but that's all I wanted to say.
You know what? It's interesting that you said that, because when I look at the mindset, whenever I want something in my life, once again, I'm not perfect at this by any stretch, but whenever I want something, I act as though I already have it. I give thanks to God as if I already have it. And to me, like, I'll give you an example. My wife was in a car accident last February 7th, 2025, and we had to go out of province for care. And it was tough. It was friggin' tough. She still sees multiple doctors every single week here in St. John's. And it was a journey. It was a journey on me, on her, on our little boy. Whenever I felt like we really needed something, like, in terms of treatment or whatever it was, I would literally get on my knees, hands up, and I would thank God for having it, even though we didn't. And I think when we get into a state of mind where we're feeling gratitude as opposed to wanting, like, people think, oh, gratitude, oh, that's woo-woo, that's no. When we give thanks for something we already have or we don't have, remember, the brain doesn't know the difference between something real and a thought. So if we say thank you, the body is actually going to feel as if what we're giving thanks for actually legitimately, genuinely happened. Releases, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, the good feeling chemicals, the good feeling neurotransmitters, as opposed to saying, I don't have this and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know how many times over the course of the last year, like, when like our little boy it was tough for him too, seeing his mom go through that. And I don't know how many times I'd get on my knees and I'd say, thank you for, restoring him. Like, thank you for his mom, my wife, being completely healthy, being completely whole, even though that wasn't the reality. But I had to change my mindset in order for my eyes to see the opportunities out there that existed to get one step closer to helping her. And I think feeling it and living it and acting upon it as if it already happened is one of the most effective things we can ever do when trying to attract or become attracted to whatever solution we want in our lives.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's really in our world, or I do it even like on the like more tactical business consulting, is like you the other side of coin from gratitude. If you can't get to gratitude, to be able to say I get to or I have and be thankful, is resentment. And I don't know anything more toxic and life debilitating than holding resentment.
Yeah, I
There's
agree.
a very hard road back if you get to
yeah.
a point of resentment.
Yeah.
And it's like the other side of the coin.
Mhm.
So if you have any choice, it's like, well, it's easy to make the choice between gratitude and resentment. It's not easy to get there, but it's easy to understand which one you want more of.
Yeah, so true.
It's also interesting. Another thing, then, Levi, I swear to God, you can shift gears right after that. I promise you. Promise you. I'll give a shout out to my friend Peter Garones. I've been working with him a little bit. He's starting a coaching business, and I'm always fascinated with coaching. So I was like, sure, let's do this. And one thing that he's been really driving home is this, like, proximity is power, and who we're around. And I mean, we can all think of the people that kind of give or take our energy or put us in a better headspace. Or, there's some people, like, you look at the weather differently if you're around these people. Like, it's incredible. And I've read this book. It was one of I think it might have been the first self-help book I ever read. It was Eric Thomas. Are you familiar with him?
Mm-mm.
He had that viral video a long time ago about wanting it as bad as you got to breathe. Um,
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
yeah,
Oh, yes, that sounds very familiar.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
real powerful thing. Like, amazing. It was great for that time in my life. It was great. But he said something in that book that I'll never forget. And it was, choosing your friends is a life and death situation. And
I like that.
it's so simple and so easy. Like, and I think about it constantly, the people that you maybe should spend less time with or cut out, or because you can shift your mindset that quickly from just being around the right people. My goal is to create as much of a bulletproof mind on my own now. Like, how can I do that type of work, but also recognizing I'm going to have to spend more time with these people, and this is going to be like a great catalyst.
It's more complicated when you choose family, but that's a different topic.
Is it ever?
Yeah. All right, I'm taking
Really
control.
good point.
Because I had two questions. I got through one, and one of them was just like,
what's your favorite color, Jeremy?
Yeah, exactly.
And we didn't even talk about conspiracy theories yet.
Not yet. You can go there after. I got one question, and I actually want to ask it more now, not less, because I now understand some of the mind shift and the thinking, and your knowledge of motivation. So I now, maybe there's nothing here. So I was a guest on your podcast a little over a year ago, and I've been on a bunch of podcasts. I ran a couple hobby ones. We're doing one, much different goals and process that you're doing. But everything felt very intentional. And I wasn't in your first 100 or 200, I don't think. I would love to understand. So you are, some of the things I recognize, you had really minimized the amount of time on your plate to execute. You had maximized distribution and value out of it. You made it so that there was lots of systems and process and control. We pretty much made what we enjoy. Otherwise, we would never continue it. And then we're trying to get benefit out of it. But this is like a guilt. Like, we have meaningful conversations every week or two, and this creates that opportunity, and we'll get some exposure. But you look like, from my experience as a speaker, very intentional. You recently, after I was a guest, made a change to expand your audience. So although I understand that you've been like building in front of people and being vulnerable, everything feels like you have an intentional goal of what you're trying to build and why and where it's leading, is that complete crap? Or did you have some intention? And also, where are you trying to go? Like, what is the goal now? Like, it just seems so systemed.
It's a really good question, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I really do, and it is very intentional. One thing I try to do with this show is to make it the least amount of work on the guest. It's, sometimes I shoot, like today is a much slower day, is three episodes today. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 10 a day, like literally 10 a day, but it will only release one every weekday. But I could have a bank of, God knows, 20, 30 episodes at any given time ready to go. So when this started to become a full-time career, which it is now, then I was able to devote all my working hours to the show. One thing I took very seriously, these leaders, these business titans, people who own their own businesses, like you guys, you're busy. You got family. I wanted to make this have the least amount of work on the guest's life as I possibly could. I also wanted them to know I'm not going to ask you any uncomfortable questions. I want to make sure that the questions that are going to be asked are appropriate. I want this show to be about positivity. We share struggles and all that stuff too, but I want to make sure that, and I tell them when I do the interview, like before, I say, listen, if you say anything that you probably didn't want to say, or in retrospect, like, it's out of the show. It will never be published. I promise you, it will never be published. And like, I had a guest come on actually last year, and we did the full entire show. And then I think it was maybe the next day or something, he wrote, and he's like, yeah, I don't want, and it was edited, it was ready to go, and you know how much work goes into all of that. He's like, I don't want to do it. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Tell me when you're ready. We'll have you back on. So I always made it very intentional, very systematic. I use apps like Calendly, so when they book, it's there. People can cancel. Like, it's funny when people cancel. They say for whatever reason, they email me and they're like, I am so sorry. It's like an hour, and I got to cancel. Something came up. I am so sorry. And I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't even notice, because it's only like a half an hour before the the show. I go into my Calendly and I'm like, okay, this person's up next. And if they reschedule, I don't even know that they reschedule, and they can reschedule as many times as they want. And so, yeah, it is very systematic. We know what topics we're going to talk about in advance. I never talk about controversial topics. They get emailed reminders about, here's the link, here's what your topics were, here's, we're set to go there now. And I always try my very best right before we click record to make them feel completely at ease. I always say, listen, we're not live. We're never going to be live. If you ever mess something up, let me know. Or re-record it. Your previous answer will never get seen. And to answer your question, where this show is going, or where I want it to go. So right now, I think I achieved one of the goals, which is it's full time. This is what I do. I don't really speak anymore unless it's local or something and I don't have to go on the road. This is a home studio. Like, my little 4-year-old is running around downstairs. Like, you probably hear him every now and then. But like, I created this, like, I'm just looking at all my gear there now, just from looking at ChatGPT and YouTube videos of what gear I need, what I don't need, and that kind of thing, and just building it very messy, and learning along the way. And right now it's full time. I want to go exclusively. Ultimate plan is to go exclusively with a few different partners who really get value out of partnering with me. Like, we have
like a sponsor or
but more exclusive. Like, right now we have about maybe 12, and we're just kind of seeing what synergy works best. Like, for instance, Yasmina Leach, biggest creator on LinkedIn in the world. He's a partner of the show. His community Link Up phenomenal community for anybody who wants to grow on LinkedIn. So he's an official partner. Richard Vanderbloom is an official partner with his business, Just Connecting. And several other partners. Favicon is another one, and got maybe about another maybe 10. And we're doing this 2-month pilot where where I promote them. They basically pay me for the exposure. And at the end of 2 months, we're about to launch that next week. At the end of 2 months, sit down and we're like, was it advantageous for you? Was it advantageous for me? What makes sense going forward? So, I think I'm doing it right this time around. I'm not jumping into like 6 months contracts or 2-year contracts. It's a pilot to see what works, to see if I can use my platform and what I do, my audience, which are all professionals, to bring business to the sponsors. And that's what I do. Like I want to make sure I'm pleasing the sponsors and the partners involved. So we're launching that next week, and we got some friggin' massive names on board. And what's really attractive for the sponsors and the partners is to align themselves with the other sponsors and partners, because we're only going with the biggest of the biggest. So that's the alignment part is really important. So anyway, I like to answer your question. Like, one of the biggest things is that it is full time, so that's great. And it's just growth now. It's growth. I just want to continue to make sure I continue to get the great guests on the show every day. We release an episode every single weekday, so 5 days a week, 7 a.m. Eastern time. And which is what is really cool about, I don't spend a dime in marketing the show, because 99% of the guests on the show repost the episode. So then their network knows about me that same day, bang, like that. And then my channel grows up every single day. It is a system for sure.
Yeah, I won't get into geeking out on your tech stack, but I was wondering whether you're currently building any kind of like ongoing team, whether it's an employee or like editors or producers, or are you building that structure, or are you kind of staying super lean? It's one of those decisions that most people with a creation role kind of, need to make that decision.
I do everything myself, from start to finish, to the vetting of the guests, to talking to other guests on the show, in terms of vetting other guests to see if they, if it's a good guest that's coming up, to the recording, to the questions, to the approval, to the emails, to the links, to the bookings, to the actual recordings, obviously, to the editing, the green screen editing, to the publishing, to the copywriting, to everything. But having said that, one episode 2 years ago probably took about 8 hours from start to finish. One episode after 500 episodes, you get it in your blood, and you can probably turn an episode around in from start to finish, including the actual recording, which are 15 minutes or less, because our episodes are short, maybe an hour from start to finish, to the point where it's on my LinkedIn. And that's how powerful systems are when you got them in place and you really did it through trial and error. So now what used to take 8-10 hours per episode probably takes about an hour.
Wow. Very interesting. It's just we're dabbling in this. Like we've just made the decision to be a little bit more intentional, but we need to be something we enjoy. So we're going to do it in seasons. We take some times of the year off, and I would prefer a longer format conversation. I understand that there's an audience, and actually the 15 minute, 5 minute, 20 minute is a more effective tool for our type of business and marketing, but I would never want to have those conversations.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
It's the same as me networking at a chamber of commerce. Like you're going through and you have some intentional topics, but I was like, but I want to explore. Like even just I had no idea we had a 30-minute conversation that we would never have got to if I had put the time boundaries in. And so we're creating space for magic to happen. And 75% of the time it does. Mm-hmm. And then we just focus on how we can get value after that. But yeah. And also we own a content team. Like we build documentary and show level video for marketing, and we have the tech stack, but we don't invest in this, or we haven't been traditionally. And so we're excited over the next 6 months to like what can we within our boundaries of what we'll enjoy, how can we build to be a more effective tool? So it'll be interesting to see two very different directions, but I'll be watching very close to see how you're doing.
And I can understand the point of view with the longer form content. And I never do what we're doing now, like long form. And I love it because you get to go down roads that you thought you would never go down. I did not think we were going to talk about meditation. I did not think we were going to talk about OCD and ADHD and, mindset and subconscious mind and taking things personally, not taking things personally. And as you can tell, I'm very passionate about that subject. And that can only happen when it's long form. And so I do miss those conversations. Not that I've ever had them in my podcast, but I've certainly had them in live presentations on stage. And so I do know the importance of going down there.
Yeah, I'm excited. And it's created a space for us to talk to people we wouldn't normally have. Like, it's not really a client, but I'd love to learn how they tick. And for anybody like sales, like anything that resembles like soliciting or like trying to get business from somebody immediately can feel uncomfortable or it's just not a fit. Hey, I have a podcast just talking to people about really hard things. You want to be on? And it's always yeah, that would be great.
It's the old Tim Ferriss hack. He's like, you want to learn something about anybody, or you want to learn from these people, like you just ask them to be asked to interview them, and they're because it's a great kind of it's flattering to the person you're asking, and it's a win-win. I just think promoting more vulnerability, I think, is actually probably the undertone of the the podcast.
Well, it really is. We're both in peer groups. So like he's in the EO. I'm in Wallace McCain Institute, which is very specific to Atlantic, Canada.
They're great too.
But actually I got the pin on and I've got everything. Like I'm representing without representing, I guess. But a peer group in business, but you have every tribe out there, is just a place where people get it, where you can share openly, not only from a vulnerability standpoint, but everybody's going to understand. Even during the COVID years, and the worst of the COVID years, I would hold these sessions online because, lockdowns. And it was we have 70, 80 business owners join, and some people were talking about challenges. It's people just don't understand. But there was a growing number of people. It's I have nowhere that I can tell people that this is good for me, that I'm succeeding because of COVID. Or I have nowhere I can share my wins anymore. And so it's vulnerable, but also just having people. And so some of these conversations, I just got to a point where these have to be more open. Talk about failure. We had a mental health professional on. We've had business owners who were doing some crazy stuff, had some crazy failures. We've had, and you had Tracy on. We had Tracy on, one of our earlier guests. And soon after, she had gone through kind of a business challenge and failure and rebuild of herself. And
Tracy from Wallace McCain?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had her on too. She was great.
That's why
right?
I knew she was on. So she's but we did a 2-hour conversations around her identity and how much it was locked up into Millennia T. And it's just that's the type of, and she was open to it. We talked before. It's is there anything you don't want to talk about? Are you ready? Somebody once told me is people don't mind talking about scars, but they don't want to talk about wounds. And so I just is it that point yet? Because there's a lot of you guys both shared how important it is to see yourself in somebody else's story. And even if it's externally successful leaders who have no idea what they're doing or have their own stresses or don't have that quality of life or still don't get an evening off or a weekend off, socializing the reality. Because we're kind of we're in a rarefied circle. We probably all a little bit understand the business owner leader, but I still talk to friends and family who aren't in that tribe, who put them on a pedestal and all business owners are rich. It's you couldn't be further from the truth. Socializing these stories, even if it's long form, even if 10 people hear it, I think I get chills from just having that impact on the world.
And you never know who's going to hear it. It's those two women who walked up to me and encouraged me to keep sharing my message. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have started the podcast, wouldn't have kept speaking. Everything would have changed. Everything would have changed. So a story has that potential to change a lot of lives. And then it's just that compounding effect afterwards that sometimes we have no idea is even happening.
Well, I get that off my chest. I'm just, I'm sure we can get into some geeky tactical stuff. I'm excited to see where things are going. It's growing very quickly. You're hard to ignore. Is there anything that you want to make sure to share with people today before we we've talked about lots of varied topics, but before we start to bring things to an end today?
Yeah. If you have any questions for us or anything like that, or anything in particular that you wanted to share.
I think, at the end of the day, and I know a lot of people talk about this, it's almost cliche nowadays, is that if you got something on the go, I mean a business idea, and you're relatively in some place in your life where you can launch, frigging launch. Stop waiting to be ready. You're never going to be ready. Frigging launch and learn along the way, because one of the best things you can ever do is get real-time feedback. How in the world are you going to get feedback if you keep trying to perfect your product and at the end of the day probably never launch because you're not going to get it perfect? And another thing, what you think as perfect, not referring to you guys, but anybody in the world, what somebody thinks as perfect may not be perfect for the buyer. Like when I launched my first online product, I got 0 sales. I thought I was, okay, this is my month, 10K a month. This is it. I know I'm going to make it. Launched, friggin' 0, no sales, because I built a product that I would buy down the road. I didn't survey anybody. Like, I didn't build in public. People didn't want what I was offering. I concentrated too much more on the deliverables as opposed to the impact that it was going to have on the person who was going to buy the product. I just messed everything up. But I'm happy I launched because, embarrassingly enough, it didn't sell anything, but I learned what didn't work. And then I launched again. Still didn't work. So I didn't learn enough. And then it was year after year after year. But one of the biggest lessons was just consistency and showing up without getting paid. Continue to do it. For me, with the podcast, I learned my voice. I learned what I didn't like. I learned to pace myself. I learned to pause. I learned to stop talking as fast as what I normally would like to, and learned to gather my thoughts. And all of this happened because of hundreds of episodes, hundreds and hundreds of episodes. And, not to scare people, it's not going to, I think my brain is very different in terms of I can't hold a lot of content in my mind and remember it. So it took a lot of episodes for me in order to, listen and think about questions at the same time. And I don't think most people would have that issue, but I did. And, but at the end of the day, it was just consistency and just frigging launching before you're ready, and listen to the people who potentially may buy your product, or the ones who won't, which is probably just as important, and listen to why they don't want to buy your product, and really value that feedback. Not all of it, but I mean the feedback that makes sense.
That's great.
Great final words.
Amazing.
All right. I mean, I can just keep talking because I am the one who thinks while they talk. So I'll just kill silence and I'll speak too quickly. I will bring us to a close. I think maybe there's a 2.0 in the future. I know that offline there definitely should be a 2.0. I'm excited to kind of learn and see how you're going online in the future. And maybe at some point you'll want to put some systems in place and you need us. Who knows?
Exactly.
Because eventually, people like you don't want to work the level of hours you're working.
That's so true. And I'm at that place there now where the show has grown so much over the last year that, one of these days I won't be doing the editing. I won't be doing a lot of the different things. And I will just be doing the recordings, which I love, sitting down with people I respect.
Well, happy to have a free conversation on that, because I deeply, so the way we say is I want stronger organizations, and I want you to feel like you can be fully engaged, but not that it depends on you to move forward. And that's where that little bit of unhealthy stress is. And so there's no removal of you in the process, but could you phone somebody else to take it over? Is it to that level of maturity so that it's not you come back, I don't want to revisit for you the trauma with your wife's accident, but if the you could just hand the keys to somebody and it went ahead, just that level of freedom. And that might be an extreme example, but eventually I don't want to have it so that I have to show up the same me every time. My wife's father-in-law passed away suddenly 2 or 3 years ago, and I was able to say, "Hey, Colby, here's the keys. Just make the decisions as I would make them. I'll see you when I see you." Yeah. And the freedom of that is something I don't ever want to live without.
Yeah, I hear you. And that's so important. Right now, I could hand off everything other than the actual recordings to somebody, and and it is a lot of work outside of the actual recordings, as you both know, to run a podcast. So eventually, I will hand over the keys to that to somebody when the time comes. Like a lot of entrepreneurs.
Or something. It might not be somebody.
Yeah, good point. Oh my God. Yeah, you just open up a big can of worms there.
Yeah. That's foreshadowing for episode 3.0.
Yeah, but I mean, eventually I do want to hand over, that amount of work other than the recordings. I need to be the person interviewing the people. But one of these days, maybe we can chat about it.
Well, thank you very much for your time and your generosity in sharing. Like, I think we see a kindred spirit, aligned in values, complementary in skills, and that's always the best.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine. God, pleasure's all mine. We'll definitely stay in touch, and I'm looking forward to chatting to you guys again, on and off camera.
Absolutely.
This episode of Built to Last is brought to you by Iron House Pro, your behind-the-scenes partner in building organizations designed to thrive. We specialize in solving the big challenges, the small annoyances, and everything in between. So while you're out there dreaming big, we're here making sure your systems, processes, and people are ready for tomorrow. Iron House Pro, driven to create lasting organizations. Learn more at ironhousepro.com.